This is your time, Sooners fans. Appreciate you being here, the voice of college football, OU. Please hit the like button before we get started. Enter the chat, hit that like button, get it out of the way. Thank you for your support in that way. Also, subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live, which is typically right now, Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. Central Time for OU Sooners Live. We've done it 53 consecutive times. With Jason Ray from Last Word on College Football. Always appreciate Jason being here. And without Jason, I don't think we've got an Oklahoma channel that's posting content just about every day. Jason, appreciate you being here. How you doing?
Doing good, Mark. You can tell it's definitely spring in the air right now. My allergies are showing the ill effects of spring, but no, it's exciting. Spring football is in full effect, so it's a great time. Gives us a little bit to talk about before summer and fall camp gets going.
I was taking that as a positive statement when you first started to utter that, and yeah, a lot of people suffer from allergies that are just irritating, and I can't relate, but yes, I know from being around a lot of people that that just is an irritation that hits this time of year. I was surprised doing our Nebraska show yesterday, and Greg Peterson, whom we do the show with from Husker Online, mentioned that it was 90 degrees there. I thought that was hyperbole. I figured it wasn't 90 degrees. I looked it up. It was 90 degrees in Lincoln, Nebraska yesterday.
It's crazy. Wow. Yeah, it's kind of been back and forth here as well. There's days where it'll be in the 70s or 80s, and then there's days where it's, kind of dipping into the 40s and 50s. So I think that's, it's the time of the year. There's specifically around Oklahoma, there's a lot of, we've had some thunderstorms and tornado warnings and watches and stuff like that. So it's kind of it's definitely the situation where if you don't like the weather in Oklahoma, just stick around for another day. It'll change.
Well, Jason, we are deep into spring practice at this point, and I'm going to ask you the same question I ask you every week. That's what's the latest? What have you been able to gather from the goings on in Norman?
I think so, Mark, just kind of starting on the offensive side of the ball, I think a consistent theme this spring that you've heard, which is probably music to everybody's ears that follows this team, is consistently almost every opportunity that Brent Venables talks, or just consistent feedback that you kind of hear inside the program, is that the offensive line is playing much better at this point through spring than they were last year. So, I don't know, what do you attribute to that? I think, McCade Mattower coming in, I think helps, from that perspective, just in terms of who Oklahoma lost. They lost their starting tackle from last season. So I think that's, I think a lot of us thought that might potentially be a kind of a plug and play situation for Oklahoma, kind of taking over that role from Marquise Hayes and others that kind of played the guard position. I think you also are seeing you're seeing Anton Harrison and Wanye Moore start to take, at least initially, to take that next step. Hopefully kind of solidify those tackles, those bookend positions. So I think overall, just hearing really good things about the offensive line and just how they competed, how they blocked, what they, adjusting to the speed of the Jeff Lebby offense, as opposed to where they were at this time last year. I think continue to hear really good things about Dillon Gabriel. I mean, I think there's not a whole lot that was surprising, but I think even though that Jeff Lebby coached him, I think one thing that I'd heard last week, which was interesting, is they knew what they had with Dillon Gabriel coming in. It's not like he's a brand new player that's new to the position, new to playing big time college football, even though it was a little bit lower than Power 5. But I think the one thing that they've said, they were maybe shocked might not be the word, but very pleasantly surprised at how great of a decision maker he is, and how good, how accurate he is. I know me and you have talked a little bit about this in terms of his accuracy, while it wasn't bad, I think it was, typically in the low 60s. I think in even a couple years at UCF in the upper 50s, where I think Oklahoma would like it to be more in kind of the mid to upper 60s. So uh, obviously that kind of remains to be seen when the lights come on, so to speak. But I think that's very helpful. I think a lot of folks looking at Oklahoma don't really have a ton of concern with Dylan Gabriel, but I think just understanding that, maybe one of his perceived weaknesses is that accuracy, and obviously being able to perform at week in and week out at the Power Five level is really good. So I think that's beneficial. I think when you look at the running back situation, I think all these three kids are challenging each other. Even heard from one source that I talked to that I heard said, wouldn't be surprised that, if I told you that Javante Barnes is the best overall running back right now on campus, it's not an overstatement. So I think, there's some stuff that kind of goes with that as well. But I think on the defense, and then when you move to the defensive side of the ball, really pleased with Danny Stutzman from a linebacker perspective. Brent Venables kind of singled him out as a guy that's playing really, really well, just kind of sideline to sideline, and knowing what to do, where to be, and just kind of his overall play. I think at the deep, when you look at the defensive line, Jordan Kelly is a guy that was called out in terms of, he's a guy that hasn't really necessarily played a lot, but talked about him being really their most complete, most consistent defensive lineman. Jalen Redmond's another guy that is called out, that at times he's absolutely unblockable, and at times, he's not, always, not it's not an effort thing, but he's just not always there, and that doesn't always show up. So I think he's still going to be their best defensive lineman. I think when it's all said and done, Ethan Downs is another guy from a defensive end perspective that's really, really played well. It was a kid that has just a tremendously high motor, and I think he's there was kind of some joking that I'd heard about, that he's taking that whole uncommon effort thing that Brent Venables has instilled to a new level. And then I think the last is the first media availability that we got to see from Brandon Hall, which is the new safeties coach for Oklahoma, was previously at Oklahoma with Brent Venables as kind of an analyst back in, when Venables was here during his first stint. So that was obviously a little bit of a natural progression for him to come here. But talked a lot about Billy Bowman. He's a guy that's starting to become really more, I think, familiar with the position. He played a lot of nickel, then played cornerback a little bit last year, and then now moving to free safety as being his primary position, asking a lot of questions, really just kind of learning a lot, and feels like he'll be in a position to make a lot of plays for Oklahoma back in the secondary, and really just kind of understand one thing that I've consistently heard as well, Mark, which is, this isn't terribly surprising, but it isn't a ringing endorsement from the last staff, is that a lot of these kids, regardless of position, are, how do I say, they've got a lot to learn, because Grinch's system was very, very basic, very, very simple. There was about three or four base plays that they would run, and obviously there were some things off of those, but it was very kind of basic in mentality. Whereas we know that Brent Venables is very complex in terms of the different looks that he'll give offenses and things like that. So I think as much physically, I think there's a lot mentally for them, this spring. But I think the one thing that is what you would expect. But I think the one thing that Venables mentioned in his press availability on Monday was that, where we're at now, where Oklahoma is at in the spring, he feels like that they're going to be on a different planet come when fall camp comes through, because there's still a lot of learning that the kids are able to do on their own throughout the summer, and obviously being able to go through those conditioning programs, and just kind of learning themselves, because the buy-in has been, again, it's something that he talks about every time. The buy-in has been incredible. He's incredibly pleased with just the desire that a lot of these kids have to be coached hard, and to be successful, which they don't, a lot don't necessarily think that was always the case with the previous coaching staff. So I think, having that willingness and being in those kids being able to go out and do things on their own and, hold themselves accountable will be certainly will be fruitful for them as they, kind of move from the spring to the summer and certainly the fall camp.
Oklahoma Sooners Live. We're here for you every Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 where it counts. And we appreciate you all being here. And again, keep in mind that we hit our mark on Wednesday just about 99% of the time, but every once in a while, because of schedule changes, we need to go live at another day and time. So that's why it's important to subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. And also when we upload fresh content. We talked to Parker Thune from OU Insider on 247 Sports here recently, so those videos are being posted as well. Appreciate the comments and the questions in the chat. We will get to them. Recruiting is pretty quiet right now, so understand that, Nelson Express. So we're going to hit up Jason with your question, but again, keep in mind that recruiting's a bit quiet as we stand right now. But Nelson's asking, Jason, if you had to put money on it, who would you say we can expect to commit after the spring game?
Yeah, so Mark, it's quiet. It's very quiet in terms of commitments. So there's a lot of movement going on behind the scenes, and I think we can talk about this a little bit more next week when it's closer to the spring game, just solidifying the number of visits. But this is going to be a monumental, gigantic recruiting weekend for Oklahoma on the 23rd. They've got tons of kids that are already coming in. I think the guy that I would say, Nelson, right now that they're really hot on, that looks like he could be close to committing is Caden Green. He's an offensive lineman that Oklahoma has been involved with and talking to. So I think that's the guy that immediately comes to mind who could be there. He's obviously a 2023 guy as well. So he's a guy that I think would be, as it stands right now, would be the guy that I would think that is probably the biggest chance to commit closer.
Clayton Smith didn't see the field too much last year, but my goodness, a 2021 top 50 player in the nation, top 10 player in the state of Texas, the second-rated edge rusher, which always has most football fans' ears kind of perk up because we know how important it is to get to the quarterback. And if you're an elite edge rusher, there aren't too many of those guys around, but Clayton Smith was given that kind of evaluation coming out of high school. Hit the field for 3 games and 3 tackles this past season. I got to think most of that might have been on special teams. I don't know for sure, but Trafone is thinking, no, that's Trap House, my bad, that Clayton Smith could possibly break out.
It's interesting, Mark. I mean, I think when you saw Clayton Smith come in last year, I think he was a safe bet for most people of a kid that could get on the floor or could get on the field very, very quickly. And it never really materialized, the way a lot of us thought that it might. He was a little bit raw. And I think really, again, kind of the same thing coming in this spring. There was a lot of thoughts that, he could be a guy that at that edge position that could challenge and could get on the field. And some of the things that I'm hearing, he's still trying to he's a little bit undersized for what what they're looking for in that position. They've got a lot of guys that are really big. They've got the transfer from Hawaii is about 6'4", 260. And that's the kind of build I think that a lot of those guys are looking at. And then you've got Marcus Stripling, who's a little bit more undersized, but I think from all the things that I've heard, he's not quite there along with that group just yet. In terms of making the move, he's probably a little bit behind Marcus Stripling in a depth chart perspective. So I think again, Mark, continues to be a really big spring for him. His ability to kind of get on the field and what that looks like, specifically from a spring game perspective on, really how important that is. I mean, I know that, sometimes spring games can be a little bit, misleading. I know, just kind of I hadn't really got a chance to watch a ton, but I know Texas A&M and Clemson were a little bit less than impressive. I think from this past weekend, just kind of looking at some highlights and looking at some of the stats. So, but no, again, for him, it's really really big for him to kind of start making that splash and making that next step, and hopefully this summer conditioning will get his body in a position where he will be able to compete and give Oklahoma some added depth to that rush in perspective.
What makes the passing game difficult to assess in these spring games, two things come to mind. Number one is that the quarterback can't be hit. So if they're touched, they're down. Well, how many times during a regular game is a quarterback touched and he's not down? He's able to escape. He's able to get the ball out. So there are sacks galore in some of these games, number one. Number two, of course, the defense is extremely vanilla. So the quarterback's level of decision-making isn't what is going to be required of him facing opponents during the fall schedule.
Yep.
What I feel I can gain the most out of the quarterback play in the spring is just sheer accuracy. Are there throws to be made?
Yep.
Are they making the throws? And to your point, I saw the Clemson game. We did a watch party right here, and DJ Uiagalelei, anything over 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, I don't think he made one throw the whole day. Like, he was just off, just missing targets. I will say that Casey Thompson, the new Nebraska quarterback coming in from Texas, very first play of the game, he threw an out where there were two guys on his receiver. One was in tight coverage. The other undercut the throw, and he still beat both of them to the sideline with the throw right there. And I thought, Adrian Martinez, I think, has the arm strength and everything to make that throw, but it's kind of scattershot as to, is he going to make the throw? It's going to be off about 7 times out of 10, where Casey Thompson, you got the feeling that, yeah, he's making that throw almost all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you in terms of watching just in terms of the accuracy from the quarterback. I mean, you saw the same thing from Max Johnson a little bit to a certain degree with Texas A&M. I know the win may have played a little bit more of a factor in that game, but yet no, it's very telling. Just, I mean, to your point, teams that just won't be able to touch the quarterback. You think as a quarterback, you've got a better opportunity to stick in the pocket and deliver some of those throws. So I think that's something specifically. I mean, you got guys that have played a lot between when you even Max Johnson and then DJ Uiagalelei at Clemson as well, and you've got specifically there, you've got you've got that freshman that has an opportunity that's going to be able to push him immediately. So yeah, I think it's always interesting to look and see what that looks like from a spring game perspective.
Marcus is asking about the defense, or at least making a statement here, first and foremost, that he thinks that OU will have the second best defense in the conference behind Baylor and a top 20 defense in the nation.
Yeah, so I think that's interesting. I think the best, you look at Baylor, probably Baylor and Oklahoma State is probably the best two defensive teams in the conference last year. Then Baylor's loses a lot in the back seven. They've got a lot returning on the defensive line, but they've got a lot of holes to fill. In the back seven, and then really kind of the same thing for Oklahoma State. They lost a lot from that team last year. Obviously, lost Jim Knowles and moving over to Ohio State, but they have a really good defensive coordinator coming in. Names escaping.
Derek Mason.
Derek Mason, yes, that's right. From Auburn. Yep. So really, really respectable defensive coordinator in the business. So I think to your point, Marcus, I think Oklahoma has an opportunity to be there. I guess, and we'll just see what those pieces, how those pieces look. And I think, I think Venables and team have been very cautious in just in terms of how they've talked about how well the defense. I mean, he holds a very, very high standard for his teams. So I think it, while it may not necessarily be great initially, I think it's a defense that's going to improve much and much throughout the year. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Oklahoma be a top 20, 30 defensive team in the country this year when it's all said and done.
Love the show, Jason. You the man. Mark, keep up the great work from Omaha, Nebraska to Norman, Boomer, Sooner all day. Thank you for the encouragement, Kenny. Appreciate the comment. Glad you like the channel and the show. You had mentioned to me, Jason, before we came on today, that Brent Venables had a message for the fans, and it wasn't a one-liner.
Yeah, it's always interesting and the differences in these media availability things between Riley and Venables it couldn't be more of a 180 if you tried. Riley did not necessarily love speaking to the media, and it was very much coach speak, and it was very much, very even keel, doesn't get too excited, doesn't get too frustrated or angry or anything, and very short answers. And whereas Venables will go on for 10 minutes about one question and then forget about what the question was that was asked of him. So I think he took a little bit of time, and it was about 8 to 10 minutes in their media availability of just talking about the standard, that he's setting with the players and the standard that he is upholding all of his staff, all of his players to, and really at the same time demands the same type of standard from from the fans, whether it's giving, donating money, whether it's just having a bumper sticker. But I think first and foremost, he's talking a lot about making sure Oklahoma has a lot of people in the stands too. It's when you look at across the country, although there wasn't as many people, even in Nebraska at these spring games that I would have anticipated. So I think, and having as close to a full stadium as possible really just gives Oklahoma a much better advantage when you see a lot of these recruits coming in, right? They're on the sidelines. If you see like 30, 40,000, fans there, and half the stadium is empty, versus if you see, three-quarters of the stadium full, or, almost at a capacity, it may make a difference in some of these recruits' eyes, thinking, wow, your fans support this program so much for, a glorified scrimmage. What is that going to look like throughout my career at Oklahoma? So really just challenging the fans to be there. I think Oklahoma set the game up in such a way, with it being at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Central Time, where it's not too early, where people can have the opportunity to tailgate and stuff like that if they want, but certainly not too late for those that are coming, maybe from out of state or whatever, to get back home at a decent time. So you take that, you couple that with the fact that what Oklahoma's doing with Baker Mayfield and the statue reveal. I think so. There's a lot of excitement for a lot of excitement for this team and for this program right now. So I think the standard previously has been, I think 52,000 is the largest crowd that Oklahoma has ever had for a spring game. And so I think if it's 52,000, I think there'll be a lot of disappointment, I think, within the program, and just within the I know you account for weather this time of the year, but yeah, no, he's challenging everybody to be there, and I'm sure they'll do some very interesting things to make, in terms of the format, to make it a little bit more exciting for the fans. But I think if you're a fan and you're not able to, you're not able to go, or you're not able to come, like, this is the year of any other year. You've got so many fresh things that I'm sure a lot of people are wanting to get their eyes on. So yeah, it was a direct challenge to, over the last 10 minutes of that press conference, to get as many people there as possible. And and I'm sure there will be. Typically, this fan base is one when they really get challenged, they rise to the occasion. So I would be, and like I said, unless there's some really, really bad weather going on, I would think that there would be a a very large contingent of Sooner fans there.
There seemed to be a peak about 3 to 5 years ago in spring game attendance. They would have 90,000 at Ohio State. Alabama and Georgia would pack out. I apologize. I don't recall, what the response was at Oklahoma exactly. Nebraska would pack out their stadium. There were a number of locations across the nation that were very enthusiastic about the spring game and, of course, the football program, and also took pride in saying, hey, we want to have the biggest spring game attendance. And I was here all day on Saturday, for the most part, reviewing all the spring games, and Clemson, Florida State, they had low attendance. And then, shoot, the North Carolinas of the world and the NC States, there was barely anybody there. But even Clemson and Florida State, and the week before at Michigan, there looked like there might be 15,000 people there, 20,000 people there. So it doesn't seem to be such the big deal. I don't know if, I'm sure COVID had something to do with it. And even though we seem to be on the other side of it, that has changed a lot of people's mindsets and their approach to life and large crowds. So I'm sure that has something to do with it. Other than that, I don't know what else.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mark. I think, there's still probably some concern with people being around, large crowds and stuff like that. So I think that probably has a little bit to do with it. And I haven't really looked at this, but I probably should, at some point it'd be a good project just to look at what the overall attendance was this past year, for college football games versus what it was pre-COVID. But no, I think that's, and there's a lot that goes into attendance. We actually, at Last Word, we actually did an article a couple of years ago, kind of looking at, the attendance just decline just in general. And, obviously TV has a lot to do with it. The product on TV is it's much more convenient for people and things like that. So, yeah, that's interesting. I don't know, what the contribute. I didn't know about the Michigan thing. That's very interesting. But just like I said, just looking at A&M and Clemson and even Nebraska, I was surprised specifically at A&M and Nebraska, just the lack of people that were there. Because when you look at it, I think, if I'm an A&M fan, I'm probably more excited as I've ever been for um, a Texas A&M football season based on where they are with recruiting. The season that they had last year. So, yeah, it's interesting. Maybe there's a lot of contributors to it. Part of the coming out of COVID and not really wanting to be, kind of neck to neck with a lot of people, or there's opportunities to watch it on TV, or maybe the excitement's not as much in certain places as others.
To extend on your point about Texas A&M, you would think that there would be peak interest because all the excitement's there concerning the talent, but at the same time, they still have a quarterback battle. So they don't have Bryce Young at quarterback where, okay, it's a foregone conclusion, he's the guy. No, we've got a quarterback battle on top of our excitement, on top of this kind of uneasiness as to, is this going to happen? Are we going to be able to do it? We haven't proven anything. We've just stockpiled talent and just been a good team. But I think it's a mix among the Texas A&M fan base and all of college football looking at Texas A&M in terms of, wow, this is impressive, but it's not getting done yet on the field. So it's an interesting lab experiment of sorts to see whether Texas A&M is going to come through this year. They might be the most intriguing team from that standpoint in college football this year.
Yeah, they are. I mean, you have to assume that this is a team, Mark, that's probably, I mean, maybe preseason top 5, right? I mean, with the recruiting class that they have, and even though he wasn't as accurate as you would like in the spring game, Max Johnson is somewhat of a known commodity in the quarterback world. Definitely an improvement over what they've probably had over the last couple of years, and they've got the talent all around him. Can they? But at the end of the day, they have a fairly tough schedule from what I recall. I know they have to go to Alabama this year, if I remember right. Um, but anyways, that to your point, I think if they've got to be able to solve that. I certainly understand they beat Alabama last year, but they had a little bit of a midseason slump where they lost a couple of games where they shouldn't have. But yeah, I mean, this is the year you would think, right? I mean, this is the year where they've got a lot of things in place with the recruiting class, specifically this year, but even the last couple of years, how it's much improved, and you've got a coach there that has championship pedigree, so you would think the excitement would be bigger than ever for A&M football right now.
They lost to Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. There's no shame in that. Those are good football programs. But if you consider yourself a national championship contender, you don't lose to Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. Lose all three of those games.
Right.
All right, back to the Sooners. Sooner Thrawn, our guy Sooner Thrawn, who's been with us for a long, long time. He's going to the spring game for the first time in years. All right. Very nice. D-Rock Irish is asking, I don't know if you heard this comment from Dabo Sweeney during Clemson's spring game, that he thinks that college football teams should be playing a spring game. He says, from the very lowest level of football all the way through the NFL, there are preseason games, jamborees at the high school level, the whole deal. We're the only sport, we're the only level of this sport that doesn't have any opportunity under game-like conditions to, against an opponent, kind of work things through. And so Dabo Sweeney would like to see an August preseason game against, you see it in the NFL where teams that are in close proximity, maybe the Rams and the Chargers get together for a week and practice and scrimmage at a training facility. But that's what Dabo's proposing.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a great idea. I think, even though a lot of people don't like to listen to him, Lincoln Riley was actually a proponent of that a couple of years ago as well. He mentioned, the same thing. And no, I completely agree. I mean, and it's, to your point, it's very valuable to understand at every level outside of the collegiate level, there's preseason scrimmages, whether that looks like, if it looks like playing, a lower level team, or maybe a team that's like for Oklahoma playing Tulsa or something like that would be good. No, I think it's very valuable because you see teams, to your point, Mark, that first game of the year, they're not ready. There's some other things that they've just not been able to get ready, because for so many, I mean, you can only go against your own team so many times. So no, I think that would be great for college football just in general, great for teams just getting ready for the first game of the year. And then like I said, great for the fan. Like who wouldn't be excited to see these games early in August, just a scrimmage of some sort? And and I think teams would still keep it very vanilla in nature. And I mean, they're not going to show anything new or anything like that. But no, I think that would be such a value add, not only for the game, but for these individual teams as well.
I hope Ryan is not a legitimate meteorologist, as I don't care if there's a tornado on the ground. I'll be in the stadium on the 23rd. Dedication, Ryan. Appreciate that. A lot of people commenting. Once you made your comment concerning Oklahoma's possible next commit, that Trey Wisner, the running back out of Texas, top 20 running back in the nation, top 50 player in the state of Texas, according to 247 Sports, is a pretty solid Oklahoma lean, according to, Parker Thune's on there, and 6 other Oklahoma. Well, I guess that's only one prediction. I thought it was 6. I don't know what that means. Anyway, they got a bunch of numbers there that I haven't sorted through. But anyway, it's a crystal ball lean from 247 Sports on Trey Wisner, the running back out of DeSoto, Texas, going to OU.
Yeah, he's definitely the other one that kind of came to mind, Mark, when I was at when the question wasn't initially posed, and I think that wouldn't be a surprise at all. Specifically the way that DeMarco Murray has been able to recruit that running back position. That wouldn't be a surprise at all. And I've heard from multiple sources that he's a very heavy lean to Oklahoma at this point.
All right. Appreciate everybody being here. Oklahoma Sooners live. And you know what to do once the live stream is over, folks, because we've got the most people in here and probably will increase from here. So we've got the largest number of people always at the close of the show. So head on back and catch the rest of the live stream once it posts in about 15 minutes. We've got about 20 minutes left to go. And we've got a new addition to the conference as of just hours ago with JT Daniels. His decision was down to Oregon State, Missouri, and West Virginia. And JT Daniels is a Mountaineer. Now, Oklahoma and West Virginia get together on November 12th in Morgantown. Jason, we started a West Virginia show about 15 to 20 weeks ago. And my West Virginia guys, one in particular, I know that Travis Kenobi, who writes there at Last Word on College Football. They do a phenomenal job. And much like you, we don't have a West Virginia channel without their contribution. But they don't like, I can tell they don't like when I tell them that their quarterbacks are no good. When I say they're no good, they're either unproven, which, that is certainly the case, or recently not good. And I don't like to disparage any college football players. They're amateurs technically, but that's what we do. Compare them against the field and what is the standard in that conference, and their quarterback play has not been good. So now they have a quarterback situation where it's going into this JT Daniels situation again. And I even asked them, I said, because I could tell they were defending their quarterback room. And I said, where would you rate your quarterbacks against the rest of the Big 12? Because as I see it, you're bottom 3. And they had to agree. Now that's all changed. JT Daniels, he's proven. So he played for a 5-7 USC team that had a lot of talent. He had a decent year that people have to consider. He was playing in what would have been his senior year in high school in the Pac-12, starting at quarterback for USC. So he beats out those quarterbacks, Keaton Slovis included. He goes to Georgia. He beats out everybody there, including Stetson Bennett, and gets the job at Georgia and only loses it because he gets hurt. And so he's that good, and his numbers aren't eye-popping. They're not C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, but they're really good. I got to think that West Virginia just picked up a top 10 to 15 quarterback in the country.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the only concern that I would have is, how healthy is he, right? I mean, I know I know he was out for a large majority of the year, last year for Georgia, but how if he's healthy, if he's right, absolutely agree with you. Top 10, 15 quarterback in the country. And I think, when you look at quarterbacks coming back, or the quarterback rankings within the Big 12, you've got to put before this, you got to put Gabriel, for Oklahoma, 1 or 2, right? Kind of depending on, because Oklahoma, because the Big 12 doesn't have a lot of returning, you know, really, really good quarterbacks. So I think with JT Daniels coming in, you that's more of a conversation, I think, now between, likely between Spencer Sanders, I think, to a certain extent, based on what he's done, and then JT Daniels as well. So I think another intriguing part of this whole JT Daniels thing in West Virginia is they play Pitt the first game of the year, and Keaton Slovis is at Pittsburgh. So that's pretty intriguing of a first week matchup. And so yeah, it'll be. I think it's obviously good for the Big 12. Makes that game that Oklahoma goes into Morgantown in November much tougher than initially thought. Without a doubt. So yeah, I think that'll be very. Very interesting to watch, because to your point about the kind of the lackluster, subpar quarterback play, West Virginia has traditionally been pretty good defensively, right? Specifically over the last couple of years, but they've not really been able to kind of score at the level that they need to and get the ball downfield. Daggy, was a serviceable quarterback, but he wasn't anybody that was going to, beat you downfield with his arm or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, I think yeah, and that'll be interesting. And I've seen some questions here. So I believe Daniels is a grad transfer, so that's why he'll be able to
Yeah.
be eligible immediately. Otherwise, he would have to sit a year. But no, I think it's good for the Big 12. Absolutely, just to see, when we put our kind of prognostication hat on and identify, what teams are going to be, what are going to be good, and it definitely has the opportunity to shoot West Virginia up the pole just a little bit.
West Virginia played 6 games last year where they didn't score 20 points. Yeah, their offense was not good.
Yeah.
They scored single digits against Minnesota, Oklahoma State, and again, didn't reach 20 points 6 times. Half the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't cut it, especially these days. So JT Daniels, I think that's a significant upgrade. I got to think that he's a top 3 quarterback in the conference.
Yeah, definitely. Without just kind of looking at it, I think he's probably there. I mean, you've got I'm trying to remember who all's returning. You've got Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State. You've got, I mean, I guess Max Duggan to a certain degree at TCU, and you've got to assume that Dykes is going to make him even better than what he's been in the past. Just kind of thinking through the teams right now. I mean, the Baylor quarterbacks weren't really anything, incredible. You've got when you look at the transfer, I guess you got Adrian Martinez coming to Kansas State, which you could make in certainly not top 3, but maybe top half of the Big 12. So no, I think he's definitely, I think, top 2, top 3, without even really kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, I pretty much think it's Dylan Gabriel, JT Daniels, and then the Texas quarterback situation is, of course, intriguing because Hudson Card is still there, but Quinn Ewers is the guy that everybody wants to see and win the job, and certainly you would think can claim as the most talented quarterback, but no experience. So,
yeah,
it's a great get for West Virginia football for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it certainly puts them into bowl, projection area, maybe even 7-8 win team, with him, or maybe even more. They've got a tough non-conference schedule. They've got Pitt and they've got Virginia Tech in the non-conference, so that'll be tough.
He's got his entire offensive line coming back from last year as well. All right, Oklahoma Sooners Live with all of you each and every week. We're glad that you enjoy the show. Bring some other college football fans in with you as well. Well, Jason, I guess if there are no other Sooner comments or questions or anything you want to hit on, we could run down my Big 12 and national coaches rankings. You ready for that?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, let's serve it up. So, folks, produce videos over on the main channel where I knocked out my coaches rankings in all the Power 5 conferences, and then I put it all together at the end, and it came out like this. So the list that I have is the national coaches list. So I will just pick out the Big 12 coaches, and then we will know, obviously, where they stand in the conference. So going from bottom to top, Joey McGuire from Texas Tech. This is just pretty obvious that I had a lot of feedback from a number of people that didn't understand why I would rank some first-time head coaches higher than current head coaches. And my thought process was that if you're a first-time head coach, let's say Dan Lanning at Oregon, so you've basically shown us nothing. You're 0-0. But there are some indicators there. He's doing a nice job on the recruiting trail. He was able to juggle Georgia national championship responsibilities with holding together Oregon. And if coaches, in my opinion, are not getting the job done, then I'm going to rank them below even the first year. I'm giving a 0, basically a neutral ranking to a first-year head coach. But if you're Dino Babers and you're 15-35 in the ACC, I'm ranking you below a guy that basically is a 0 right now. I explained it this way. If I had a sales staff and I had 10 people and I thought 8 were knocking it out of the park, they were great, and I had 2 that were underachieving, and I was about to replace them, or I was looking to replace them, and I just hired 2 people and their resumes were phenomenal, but they hadn't worked for me, but their resumes were phenomenal and their interview was phenomenal. And I was pretty sold on them. And if somebody asked me, would you want to replace the 2 that aren't performing well with the 2 that you just interviewed? I'd say, well, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty confident because their resumes are verified that they're better than the 2 that are showing me that they can't do the job. All right. So Joey McGuire, he was only the linebackers coach at Baylor. I just, he may turn out to be a tremendous hire. We just don't know. And I kind of find the qualifications kind of curious. Just a linebackers coach at Baylor.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I agree with your placement there as well. It's so hard to win at Texas Tech. You know, based on where Lubbock is, it's, you know, the recruiting. It's so hard to recruit there. So it's such an uphill climb at Texas Tech. Maybe more of an uphill climb at any school in the Big 12, save Kansas right now. So, yeah, no, I think that's accurate. And then to your point about being a linebackers coach at Baylor, it's it's interesting. So, it's kind of, you know, it's interesting to think that they uh, essentially, you know, fired Matt Wells, and that's what they got in return. And to your point, it could end up being, you know, a really good hire and a good fit, and could do a great job in Lubbock. But was very interesting, and no, I agree with you there.
Yeah, not a knock on McGuire. Just you would think at Texas Tech, you would be looking for a successful group of 5 coach. All right. Speaking of which, Lance Leopold at Kansas just turned in a 2-10 season. So you would think that's awful, but it's Kansas. And Les Miles was not a good hire for Kansas. Hopefully they've learned their lesson from trying to grab a retread who won a national championship a long time ago, who's not a man of integrity. And this is where it got them. So now they hire Lance Leopold, who did a nice job at Buffalo, going to MAC championship games there. And if you look at how Kansas competed down the stretch, well, they beat Texas. They gave Oklahoma a good game. In their last 3 or 4 games of the season, they were competitive. So he's off to a decent start, and that's about all you could ask of him in year 1.
Oh, absolutely. I think to your point, I think what you know, what kind of separated him in my mind here in his first year versus, you know, what Les Miles was able to do, you know, in his last year, they were very largely, you know, non-competitive of any of these Big 12 games, you know, in his last year. And what Lance Leopold was able to do, you know, his first year, to your point, beating Texas, probably, I mean, I know it's tough to say this here on this channel, probably should have beat Oklahoma as well, if not for kind of a, you know, heroic play by Caleb Williams down the stretch. So should have won that game as well, and put themselves in position to win a couple of other ones. So, you know, I think if you're a Kansas fan, you have to be about as optimistic as you have been in quite some time with who you have at the head coaching position.
I should probably rank him higher, but we'll see what he's got this year. But again, just take that into consideration. Beat Texas, should have beat Oklahoma. Their last 2 games of the season, they lost to TCU by a field goal and lost to West Virginia by 6.
Yeah.
At Kansas, that's pretty phenomenal. All right, as we take it up the board, I've got to go to another folder for the rest of them. All right. Sark at 49. And that would be 10-9-8, eighth in the Big 12. I don't get it.
It's funny off, when I was kind of looking at your rankings, I'm like, my initial reaction is, wow, eighth. That's a little low. But then when I think about it, I mean, you made your points very, very valid. He's really bombed in his other two opportunities that he's had, both at USC and Washington, and it couldn't have possibly. I don't think there's any outside of just losing every single game. Um, I don't think it possibly could have went worse last year, and it doesn't. I'm sure you've heard um, this little thing with the media that they had this week with one of the players basically talking about the country club atmosphere, and the players are more interested in going and partying and playing than actually focus. So it's not gotten any better um, early on, and so this is a interesting season for Sark. I feel like, I don't know if his job is officially on the line. If they don't at least go to a bowl game this year, I would think that those people in Texas, which have extremely high expectations for their football program, um, would be not happy to the point where, it could be a discussion, right? I mean, because they in their schedule doesn't do them any favors playing Alabama early on in the non-conference, and so how he's handling this quarterback situation as well is going to be interesting with viewers, and so yeah, no, I agree with you. It seems to be more and more of a kind of a consistent theme here at Texas since Mac Brown um, has been gone, and that country club mentality, and that I don't know what it is, and it doesn't look like Sark has done a good job, at least early on, of being able um, to change that moniker within the program.
Yeah, again, I don't get it. It's been proven you can win at Washington at a very high rate. And it wasn't like he was a disaster at USC or Washington, albeit his off the field issues. But on the field, it wasn't a disaster, but he underachieved. His predecessors and his successors did better than him at both stops. And now he goes to Texas. And I'm typically pretty kind and soft on the first year. There's a big transition to undergo implementing your system, your culture, and all that. But at Texas, with that roster, you would think you could sleepwalk to 7-5. You could come in, any decent coach, and go 7-5 the first year.
Yep.
All right. I got Neil Brown at seventh in the Big 12, number 48 nationally.
Yep, certainly agree with that. He was a little bit of a down year based on last year, based on kind of the trajectory that he'd been building. But yes, middle of the pack, virtually Big 12 related, pretty close to the middle of the pack, maybe the back half of the middle. But yeah, no, I don't have any disagreement with that either.
Considering Dana Hogerson gets a lot of criticism, and he won at a pretty high rate at West Virginia. I'm guessing 65-70% of his games. He had a lot of 8-4 type seasons at West Virginia, won a conference championship in the Big East before he left there, came within a whisker of that crazy, whatever it was, 58-56 game, 59-56 with Oklahoma, of getting to a Big 12 championship. So he won at a much higher rate. Now, Neil Brown did a great job at Troy. They really took off with him there. He improved that program considerably, but he comes to West Virginia. He's been there for 3 years, and he's a game under 500. So not quite getting the job done at this point, but certainly he will be given the opportunity going forward. And Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. I can't mention Kansas State without talking about Bill Snyder, but I'm not going to do it here because of time purposes. I just think it's just incredible what he did at Kansas State. Now, Chris Kleiman takes over a Kansas State team, and he ruled, of course, at North Dakota State with 4 national championships and some ridiculous 90-plus winning percentage. He comes to Kansas State, and they're doing what you would expect them to do. They were coming off an 8-5 bowl win. They were 5-6 the year before. He went 7-6 or 8-5 the year before. he's pretty much doing what you would expect Kansas State to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, in that kind of Snyder mentality, he's kind of kept the wheels on the bus. He's not really, gone down or anything like that. So yeah, he's interesting to see what he'll be able to do as he continues to progress and get his guys in, run his system, and that nature. But it was certainly a good bounce back year for them last year, going 8-5.
Unfortunately, folks, I got to run. And so we've got to end our show about halfway through our Big 12 coaches rankings. So it's a reason to come on back. It's even more reason to come on back next week because you can hear Jason's analysis on OU as we will be heading toward the spring game. So get on back next Wednesday for Oklahoma Talk here at the Voice of College Football, 11:30 a.m. Central Time on Wednesday. Jason, appreciate you making this happen.
No problem. Thanks again, Mark. I appreciate it.